We're on air. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining the largest, fastest growing, and the most active community, which is essentially global. Started in New York City, but has gone viral. Um, it's called Large Scale Scrum, Organizational Design, System Thinking, System Modeling, Business Agility, and Product Centricity place to learn. Today we have a very special speaker, and we are going to give her the podium just in a second, but I really would like to do the honors and give a quick intro. In fact, she does not need an introduction. Today we have Johanna Rothman, who is the very well-known speaker and fiction writer, and she has done an immense volume of personal investment into the industry and into the dimension, into the area of organizational agility and adaptiveness. And she is also a very well-known publisher. She wrote stories for the pulp fiction magazine, for Fiction River, for holiday spectaculars. So she has real life with real excitement, and we should really recognize it and honor it. Today, her presence here is a great treat for us, and I would like us to treat her with a lot of respect and recognition. And the best way to do it is to keep your cameras on, keep your mics off if you can. It's going to give you more energy to speak. And please hold your questions until later when she will open up for Q&A. So with that, I would like to pass the baton over to you, Johanna. Thank you very much for joining us, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, Sheen. I really I appreciate you for inviting me, and I'm thrilled to be here. I have two monitors, so when I look over here, it looks like I'm talking to you, and when I check the chat and look for your smiling faces, I'm over there. So as long as you know, I'm not really going back and forth. I'm focused on all of you. Okay, so let me talk about fake agile is the norm, which is the name of the first chapter in my most recent book, the Project Life Cycles book. And the reason I said that is because everyone tells me they've gone agile, right? I should say I'm a consultant. People only call me when things are not going according to plan. And if all of you have your agility all going to plan, that's terrific. I will tell you some stories. I will try and be humorous and interesting, but maybe you don't need this. But my experience is the problem with everyone has gone agile is they have not. They have commitments instead of learning. Their managers either require or ask them for long and extensive backlogs and roadmaps. Those those are Gantt charts. Teams often become feature factories because they don't have a product goal which fulfills a product strategy. Instead of the team learning through experiments, the team gets all of this stuff and they're supposed to deliver. So instead of experimentation with the product or the process or learning or anything, they experiment very little. That all of this put everything in a box means that there's a lot of late changes to all of the work. Whether you call this a project or a product focus, I always talk about projects as a container for this amount of product focus. So I really like the idea of projects as a container for this much work. Um, Maybe you don't have projects, but if you do not have a product focus, you will still have all of these late changes. And the worst part is the whole idea of lightweight methods arose from wanting to have more joy and ease in the work. And instead, what we have is a grind. In the Project Life Cycles book, I call this an Agile death march. And my cover designer said, you know that there is a different way for a different definition of a death march. And I said, yes. And back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we talked about death marches for projects. That's why the that's why all those guys went to Snowbird and came up with these lightweight methods. So instead of real joy and a lightweight approach to work, we see that way too few teams can deliver fast enough. And managers want a whole lot more done now. Now, I'm not going to go into the reasons why they think they can get twice the work in half the time. I have never seen that happen, but there are many reasons that they do. So I'm not going to talk about how to change the culture in this presentation because almost nobody who is not a senior leader can change the culture. But the culture is the root cause. So instead of saying transform your culture, get an agile mindset, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about recognizing what your culture is and then how to kind of maneuver around that. So when I say that culture is the root cause, we almost always think in resource efficiency. That's because cost accounting reinforces resource efficiency. Resource efficiency is focused on the individual and what the expert can do. And when the expert does their first thing and then hands it off to the next person, there's a delay. When that expert hands it off to the next person, there's a delay. So resource efficiency is the most delaying piece of the culture in our organizations. So and flow efficiency is when we collaborate as a team. Now, if you if your organization, and I suspect that most of you have this, reward people by their individual work, you will have a very, very difficult time moving to an agile culture. However, there are things you can do in your team, and that's why I'm talking about this first. I want you all to recognize you can, unless you are a senior leader, you can probably not change the culture, but you can change how you react to it. And that's really the key. So I'm going to talk about all of your options. And the first part is to assess all of your risks, to incorporate agility into everything you do at all levels of the organization. So when I talk about risks, I talk about project risks, product risks, and portfolio and organization risks. All of those risks drive your choices for the feedback loop duration that you want. And I, of course, want shorter feedback loops everywhere. You might not need as short a feedback loop as I want. So all of this is a choice. And that's why I want to talk about, excuse me, all three of these risks. So let me first talk about the project risks that affect your life cycle choice. Many years ago, I came up with this idea of the project pyramid. Everyone was talking about projects are a three-legged stool. It's cost, quality, and date, or maybe it's features and the work environment and bugs. And everyone was talking about three of these six things. And instead, I really like to think about drivers, constraints, and floats. So think about the work that you are doing now. Somebody wants you to deliver a feature set in some amount of time with some amount of quality. Those are everything that the team can manage inside the team. However, managers think that they can decide on who and how much capability are the people are who work on this. They often say, well, we don't want this project to cost any more than such and such a number, and we will determine your work environment. However, I'm all every single project I've ever worked on that's been really valuable, nobody cared about the cost to release by the end of the project. They cared a lot more about the feature set and how good it was. So I distilled all of this into the project pyramid. One aspect of this will drive your project. You can constrain two more, and then you have to float the other three and have more degrees of freedom in your projects. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can get one and then you can or get maybe get two out of three. No, you get one aspect that drives your project. So if you need a feature set that really works, you might need a lot more iteration over the feature set. If you really care about time to release, you might need increments of value on a regular basis so you can make sure you're actually going to release it when you want to. And if you care about load defects, and often there are some kinds of projects and some kind of products where the load defects really, really matter, then you probably want to iterate on a very frequent basis, delivering so you can check and make sure you have not screwed anything up. So that's where, if you want low defects, an agile approach is really the way to go. So then there are product risks. This is all about the requirements for innovation. A client of mine said to me, we're doing a port of our old flagship product to a brand new hardware platform. We know exactly what we need to do. And I said, okay, you're sure you're not going to uncover any problems? Because this product has been out in the industry for over a decade. You're going to port the defects now to the defects later? And they said, we don't have any defects, but we can't get the hardware anymore. And I said, I guarantee you there is at least one thing you will uncover as you port from old hardware to new hardware. And they said, how much will you bet us on that? And I said, well, I could double my fee. They said, no. So I said, okay, how about a coffee? I will bet you a coffee. There is at least one of those hidden defects that you will not know until you start to port. Not only did they find one hidden defect, they uncovered several that changed all of the ways they needed to use their new approach for this new hardware. So even ports are not totally deterministic. Now, most of us live in the messy middle of we have some innovation, not everything is innovative. And if you are a startup or you're doing a brand new product and you're not sure if it's going to work, you have you need a totally innovative, recursive recursive discovery as you proceed. So you cannot use anything other than an agile approach. And I mean a true agile approach, not a whole lot of backlog and roadmap, but something that allows you to experiment as you go. Now, then there's the portfolio risks. I I still see a lot of organizations try and manage the project portfolio once a year. In January, we'll decide on the project portfolio for the entire year. And often that's wrong by February. So the more often you want to change the mix of projects and service, I should say products and services in your organization, the more often you need a more agile approach, right? You need to deliver something on this work now so the team can change and go to that work. This is very, very important. Very few organizations have sufficient stability for very long decision durations, right? And I think that 2025 is going to be a year of immense change. I don't see how we can have anything other than immense change, even if we're just talking about AI and the effects of AI on how we will all work together, what we do for products. And please don't add any more AI to my products. I really don't want it. Um, and what that means for people in technology. For decades, I've been working in this field professionally since 1977. I deserve all of my gray hair. And I find that it's so important for all of us to recognize that since 1977, we have been changing how other people work, and AI is now changing how we work. Eventually, I will figure out something to do with AI. I'm investigating now, but right now, I don't see the value in it, which means it's very, very risky to include in products and to impose on users. Right? And that means we need much more change in how we assess and manage the project portfolio. So the more risks you have across the project, the product, and the portfolio, the more you need to reduce the feedback loop duration. And I'm talking about feedback loops everywhere. So I'm going to ask you a question in the chat. Um, please, please talk about give me a number for your collaboration to enable agility. And this goes from one, where everyone works alone, a low number is not good. And to up to five, where the team always collaborates on everything. No one works alone. Now, in the middle, there's we collaborate on urgent issues, and then sometimes people work alone as number four. Sometimes people work together. So I'm gonna take a sip in water and see what you have. Oh, this is really great. I'm seeing a whole lot of threes and fours and fives. Um, I saw a 1.5. Management usually forbids even pair programming. Oh my God. Okay, well, okay. That's when your management really, really believes in resource efficiency. Um, Creating agility in an organization like that is very, very difficult. And what's really exciting, I see a whole bunch of fives. That's really great. Even if you're only at a two, um, oh, Pierre, I'm not surprised. You're a consultant as I am, so you see all of these. I'm not surprised about that at all. So I'm seeing a lot of these in the chat, mostly threes, fours, and fives. That's really great because the more collaboration any organization has, at least in the project, the more agility you can create. All right, so let me talk about life cycles first so you understand what the heck I'm talking about. Now, the serial life cycles were all their waterfall stage gate phases, but they have several characteristics. There's a lot of planning up front. There's requirements, analysis, design, code, integration, test, and release. Now, you might recognize this if you use not very much collaboration in your agile approach. And if your testers say, we cannot get to this because nobody has finished anything until the day before the end of the sprint, right? That's a serial cycle. That came about because in Royce's original paper, he said, we think it should look like this. That was on page one, right? This something like that was on page one, but with arrows that went down, so it looked like a waterfall. And we thought that if we planned enough, it was a simple matter of execution or a simple matter of programming. The problem is we all learn by doing, right? We learn by doing in programming, in testing, in project management, in anything. But we also learn by doing as a team by creating the product. And this is the reality for way too many agile teams. I put agile in quotes because they're not really agile. Um, if you are in requirements hell, I used to think that this was just a serial life cycle approach, but it's not. Requirements hell is when your roadmap has no experiments and extends past 30 days. Because as you do analysis, as you do design code integration and test, you will discover more requirements. And often that's because you're not using any kind of a test-driven approach. When people use any kind of a test-driven approach, TDD, BDD, ATDD, any kind, that all helps you in clarifying the problem you need to solve and making and bounding that problem and clarifying the design. In effect, you move up the waterfall when you use any kind of a TDD approach, which is for people who have not done this, this is very counterintuitive. So really think about of how you actually use any of the technical practices. You might have freezes. I have never met a freeze that was not slush because as you finish the coding and integration, you realize you have more requirements. Oh, and I see, yes, the whole idea of scheduled freezes that I realized in back in the 70s and 80s when I was managing projects and programs that all freezes were slush. And I really hated them. That's why we had back in the 80s when we only checked into the trunk right to Maine, I always insisted that we show our progress for any kind of a large project or a small project, large project, um, large program, small project. We did a demo every single month. That's what I insisted on in the 80s. Yeah, I know. The problem with all these ugh, all these supposedly agile teams is you get very, very late feedback. So you realize in test you did not get the requirements right. Because you can never get the requirements right. It's just not possible. Um, oh, I see. My manager exhorts me to be agile and then asks to review requirements and SOWs first before work is budgeted. Remind me, Alam, I'm not sure how you say your name, to talk about value instead of cost. Because when you change the question from how much does this cost to how much are you willing to invest for what value, that totally changes the conversation. So I'm going to kind of run through some of the life cycles quickly because any iterative life cycle that looks at that gets feedback but does not have some kind of a deliverable is an iterative life cycle without increments of delivery. That means you can have a project kiss of death. And the longer it takes for any framework or method to deliver something even internally, the more likely you are to have a project kiss of death very late in the work. Um, for me, safe is not agile, right? You can say there's agile in the name, safe is not agile because the longer you wait to deliver something, even internally, the less agile you are. Okay. And now there's a difference between internal and external feedback. So I really like to obtain feedback from outside the team. That might be internal. So many years ago, when I was working in Symbolics, we were working at creating a new operating system. We had the old operating system. We were not porting. This was a brand new operating system. So we actually brought our customers into the organization. We made them sign NDAs, Who are they going to tell? Yeah, fine, you can do this. But that's how we ask them to come in every single month to show our progress to them and get feedback from them. We had been showing ourselves our progress. So we avoided that kiss of death in that one. But I worked with many other teams since then. And again, with hardware, it's always a little bit tricky. But the longer you wait for customer feedback, the less you know about the reality of your deliverables. So that's why all of you with Agile in quotes, you are wait, excuse me, you are waiting too long for customer feedback. All right. Now, let me talk about the incremental life cycles a little bit. Notice that design to schedule focuses on release candidates. Now, the difference is this is supposedly the highest priority feature set, then the next highest priority, then the medium priorities, et cetera, et cetera. These are all release candidates. Assuming you take a snapshot, however you call that snapshot, you should be able to release that. However, design to schedule doesn't demand that you release, which is why I started to use stage delivery back before I knew there was a name for that. Um, in stage delivery, there's some amount of requirements. I always time box requirements because do you really need more than 2 weeks of requirements gathering? No. If I had to do it over again, I would limit that to 2 days. Sometimes I limit that to 2 hours. Then if you really think you need to choose the architecture in advance and often test that, that's fine. Then you can do a feature set and that tests the analysis. Notice there's a release here, right? And then there's a release for every single feature set. I find that this is very, very helpful. Michal is asking, how do you manage the financial cost and time delays of more frequent loops? In my company, it would be possible to have more frequent loops, but due to strict release windows, it would impact delay and release, not to mention increase in cost. Michal, if you are doing hardware, I totally agree with you. If you are doing software, this is where I would say if it hurts more, do it more often. A software-only product should cost you virtually nothing to release. If it costs you more, then you are not collaborating across the larger organization. And remind me to answer your question more when I ask for questions all at the end. Okay. Now, the problem with late feedback in incremental life cycles is if you have not released anything, if you only have released candidates, and then you realize the lowest priority feature set changes everything, right? This does this ever happen to you? This happens to me all the time on my books. This is exactly what happens, which is why if you follow along as I write my books, I am very nervous about releasing books in progress. And I even write on LeanPub to release books in progress because I write something at the end because I learn as I write something at the end that totally changes how I want to title the book, the description, the first few chapters. It's ridiculous. However, software is not like me and my books because I don't work with a team. In software, if you can use stage delivery and release as often as possible, then if you have something that changes something that you know about the entire project late, you can say this. We will release all of this stuff for as many feature sets until we have that project kiss of death, and then we will say release 1.0. And now you have declared victory. You have released something that people can use that they find valuable. Now, all you need to do is figure out what to do for the next release. Right? That's how one kind of cheating way that you can increase agility in the team and the organization without having to use some kind of agile method. Now, I really like combining agile approaches and making sure that I understand what I'm doing. So there's date driven, which is iterative first and then incremental. There's feature driven, which is iterative first and then releasing in time boxes. One of my clients used this particular approach, and that was a 6 week. They managed to do a short initial pass and requirements. Then they used evolutionary prototyping in a 6 week time box. Then they released another set of requirements in 6 weeks, and then they had a release candidate. Now, this is a 12 week, this is an entire quarter before they even thought about releasing something. Then they finally released something in the next 6 week time box. And that's when they finally got customer feedback. So one of the problems is with this is that because it took them an entire quarter and they could not get everything done, right? Everything, that problem of push planning, that meant that they were always behind. So what I said to them is reduce your time boxes to 4 weeks, or maybe even 3 weeks, maybe even 2 weeks, because the more you reduce your time box for all this work, the more likely you are to have smaller stories in your work. I now talk about stories. At the time I talked about features, and they were successful once you stop pushing all this work into future times. It's much easier to figure out how to release something smaller, how to think about something smaller, and how to release something smaller. So let me talk a little bit about clarifying agility. If I notice, I'm not talking about agile as, first of all, a life cycle, and I'm not talking about agile. I talk about agile approaches. So if you want an agile approach, you need a collaborative cross-functional team. That team takes a limited amount of ranked work, and this is 1, 2, 3, not high, medium, and low. They work on it and they produce increments of value frequently. Then they demo and do a retrospective. The demo and the retro helps the team learn from what they did. Now, the more you can do this, the more agility you have in your team. And I really like that because it gets you more of what your managers want, right? Your managers want everything now for no cost. It's fine. They can want that. Um, the everything costs time and money. So instead of don't have that fight with them, right? It's not useful fighting with your managers. Instead, think about what you can deliver on a regular basis. And the smaller you make your stories and the more you collaborate as a team, the more likely you are to have more agility in your team. So, um, I said earlier that agile approaches are a culture change. Now, I would really love to have an agile mindset. For those of you who know me and have seen me expand and contract through the years, I have always had a mindset of losing weight. Always, always. That's not a problem. But I had to change specific things about my practices and my behaviors, which were a cultural change for me. Um, Almost any kind of a framework or method can work for you if you have agility as your culture, not any specific framework or method. And because the culture changes as you change and learn, then any any specific framework or method has to change as the organization needs a different outcome. So think about outcome-driven agility, not outcome-driven frameworks or methods. Life cycles are specific approaches and they do not change. So the more agility you need, think about the outcomes that would get you that agility. Okay, one more thing. Agile teams have to work through the architecture to deliver. If you have component teams that work on the GUI or the API or the app layer or the middleware, you will need to figure out what to do. And I recommend check-ins daily so that you can fake working through the architecture. Oh, here's that slide. So, again, this is, I wrote a newsletter about this. So if you need to see the details, there's a newsletter about that. So when I think about agile approaches, I think about the two main approaches. One is the iterations that are time boxes. Scrum is a great example of this. Now, the shorter the iteration, the faster everyone learns. And the problem, maybe, regardless of your agile approach, as soon as you take a bunch of WIP, right, work in progress, you say, we are going to do 3 to 5 stories in this iteration. I mean, really, look at your cycle time. How many stories do you actually finish? If you're lucky, 3 or 4 or 5, right? So you only need to think about 3 or 4 or 5 for this given iteration. For every single story, you do need to do requirements analysis to design, build, test, and release and deploy. Sometimes releasing is separate from deploying. And for people who have expensive releasing, that's often because release and deploy are separated. So if you think about how short can we make our iteration, and also think about test driven of something, you can go kind of backwards through this. That will limit your WIP, your work in progress, and allow you to actually finish. Now, I used to really let me say this. I work in time boxes all the time. I often work in 20-minute time boxes because I'm writing, and I have to work in hour-long time boxes for meetings and workshops. That's fine. But the shorter you can keep your time box, the shorter the iteration, the faster everyone learns. However, I have found that all too often people use push planning for iterations. How much can we finish inside this iteration? Instead, the best, at least for me, the best question is, what is the most single valuable thing we can do in this iteration? Now, most people don't like that as a question going into iterations. So that's why I really like a Kanban system. Now, you don't need to use the Kanban method. You can use any Kanban approach, which means you have a Kanban board and you limit your WIP. I really like to right size the work so the team delivers on a specific cadence. Now, you'll notice I said cadence. One of my clients does planning every Monday at noon. Fine. They do demos on Wednesday at noon. They when do they pair or mob on almost everything else. So they have a cadence of planning, a cadence of demos. Oh, they do their retrospectives right after the demo. And they also do little kaizens whenever they need it. They use a Kanban system, right? It does not look anything like an iteration, but it really works for them. So really think about what you need in your Agile approach. Now, the reason a lot of people use iterations, my cynicism is showing, is because Scrum has really won the certification battle. And managers understand time boxes, right? So they really think that this is fabulous. I think it's a lot more difficult for managers to understand a Kanban system, especially if the team is new to a Kanban and limiting their WIP and finishing something every day or every other day. Okay. Oh, there's a question about cadence versus time box. A cadence means if you want, you are not bound by the times. So if you have, imagine you have a distributed team. Yes, I wrote a book about that too. Um, I swear to God, my kids are going to put this on my tombstone. Yes, she had a big mouth. She wrote a book about it. So when you have a cadence, you do not have to finish the work by that time. So that team that always plans on Mondays at noon, they might replan then. They're not planning for the next work. They might be replanning this work now and a little bit for the next work. So that's a cadence. And if they decide they need another cadence later on in the week, they can do that too. They're not bound by the beginning and end of the time box. And when you have distributed teams, what is the beginning and the end? Is it 9 a.m. Eastern when half the people in India have already gone home? Well, what about those poor people in India? I would suggest to you that's not a real team, but that's a different presentation. So let me talk a little bit about how you can choose a life cycle, just not an agile approach. The more risk you have, and especially if you have date or low defects or more features, the more you need an incremental or an agile approach. I should say with more features, you might need more iteration to actually understand that you are delivering the features that you want to deliver in this container. And then if you for general guidelines, if you know what you need to do, right, it's deterministic and it's a very short period of time, like 2 to 3 weeks. A serial or an incremental life cycle is fine because you're not learning anything, right? You're going to fix this very bad bug. You're going to do something that you have already been through all of the discussion. It's a simple matter of programming or testing, which is almost never the case, but a 2 to 3 week timing is probably fine. And for my guidelines, if you need to use anything more, if your container of work is longer than 2 to 3 weeks, choose any approach other than a serial approach. And that's the problem with all of these long backlogs and all of these long roadmaps. It's very, very hard. So the longer the time frame, the more you require adaptability in everything, right? The backlog, the roadmap, the strategy, all of this. So let me talk about your WIP limits to enable agility. I would really like to know, can you limit your WIP? Some people say we cannot say no to anything ever. That's a 1. A 5 is we always limit WIP. We finish what we start before taking on new work. A number 3 is we try, but the urgent work interrupts us. 2 is the shortcuts. 4 is we try, but we have to take on production support. And you have not accounted for that in your iteration or in your work. Oh, Tom, I'm not surprised you're a 5. Nice to see you here. Yeah, I see a lot of some 1s and some 3s. The portfolio always listens to add a screamer. Oh, the 4s are good. 2s are challenging. 3s are really hard. One of the reasons that people have 3s and 4s is because, how can I say this without blaming anybody? When you have an iteration and you commit, and iterations are not supposed to be about commitments to others, they're supposed to be about commitments to the teams. However, almost everybody, uh, my clients, use iterations as commitments, not just to the team, but to other people. And that means you're under a lot of pressure to push all that work into your planning. So you don't actually try and accommodate production support or anything about fixing the shortcuts from before, right? You often get a lot of pressure from well-meaning people, right? Who think that, well, if you can do 5 stories last sprint, surely you can do 6 in the next sprint. No, you might only be able to do 4 because if you're not right-sizing the work and measuring your cycle time, you don't actually know what you can deliver. So um, if you are a 1 through a 4, really think about not push planning. Think about using cycle time, and it does not matter if you're using iterations or Kanban. You can still measure your cycle time and say, how few stories do we actually need to take into this sprint instead of how many? When you start talking about how little, you change all of the ways you think about the work. So let me get to how to increase agility. First, for the team tips, collaborate on fewer things. Um, Instead of multitask individuals, and I'm not even going to talk about people multitasking between teams. That's just nuts. Um, think about one team collaborating on one piece of work at a time, maybe 2 pieces of work. Um, I really like, and this is a lean saying, watch the work, not the people. Right? Every every organization, well, how can I say this? Gantt charts were about watching the people, not the work. The way many people use Jira, it's about watching the people, not the work. Turn that around. Make sure you're watching the work, not the people. And then consider value stream mapping. Now, I've been writing about all this stuff for years on my blog, and I realized I actually wrote about a Hudson Bay start back in when people fur trapped in Canada, they were way north, and Hudson Bay was the last outpost before the Arctic. Um, I would never do that. I'm in Boston, and it's ridiculously cold here, just above freezing. So I would never do that. But the reason they went to Hudson Bay and then camped a mile out of town was to make sure they had everything they needed before they vanished into the Arctic on their own. So a Hudson Bay Start says, what is the first thing we need to do for our team to succeed? What is the next thing we need to do? What is the third thing we need to do? And then watch all of the steps as you go through delivering one story. I have a Hudson Bay Start post on my blog. It's in Manage It. I don't think I put it into Create Your Successful Agile Project, but I will write about this again so that I clarify how an Agile team can use this. Instead of doing all this upfront planning, do a Hudson-based start. Now, the other thing is measure the flow metrics. Velocity is totally meaningless. Measure cycle time, right? Velocity, let me give you a quick example. I take walks every single day. Well, I walk around the neighborhood most of the time. When it's cold, I only walk inside. And and sometimes I don't realize there's ice on the road. So I start my walk and then I come back and walk inside. But generally I walk in the same the same route every single day. I'm boring, that's totally fine. My walks take me a different amount of time every single day. And in fact, I have right sized my walks, and they still are plus and minus. It depends. How do my legs feel? Did I sleep at all last night? right? I'm a woman of a certain age. God forbid I should actually sleep. So all of this, my velocity is totally meaningless, but my cycle time matters every single day. So, and even worse, cycle time and throughput are affected by your work in progress. So when you think about your all of the work in progress, the higher your cycle time, the lower your throughput, right? So the higher your work in progress, the higher your all of this is related. I'm not gonna. I have a newsletter about flow metrics. So the longer your team takes to release something that's throughput, the less anybody trusts you, right? That's why your managers want to know how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? When will you be done? All of that stuff, right? So the more you want agility, the more you need to measure the flow metrics. Now, there's the culture and the project are all organized this way. The more the faster you can learn with internal feedback, which means often demos or internal releases with customer feedback and retrospectives, the more often you can increase your agility. Then there then there's the cheating. Just plan for shorter projects, right? Instead of having a 6 month project, plan for a 3 month project and then deliver and demo, right? The more often you deliver and demo, the more you will increase your agility. For many of my clients, they have a lot of trouble delivering and demoing something every month. So start off with every month, then once a week, then once a day, then as often as you can per day. Um, I'm not going to go over the cycle time thing and velocity. I will give you a pointer. So it's all about less spending and more delivering. That's the way to incorporate real agility. So if you think about instilling real agility, it's agile is really not the point. Instead, how fast can you choose a life cycle or an agile approach that will satisfy the customer with a working product to obtain revenue? That requires collaboration and risk evaluation, right? I don't care if you're using a life cycle. I don't care if you're using an agile approach. You can have more agility when you use all of these tips, right? And say, how short can we make everything before we deliver something? That's really the issue. So I really hope that we stay in touch. I still have 5 minutes for questions. For those of you who are interested, this is the Flow Metrics newsletter. That's all about cycle time. There's cooperation versus collaboration. That's all with value stream maps. I really hope that you look on any of my links, think about any of my books, all that good stuff. All right, so I'm going to Gene, I'm going to stop the share for the moment and see what kind of questions.
Sure. And Johanna, just in the to honor your time and to make sure we are we on track. Maybe you just want to open up for questions, let people speak up live as opposed to you.
Oh, if people have to leave, they can. I will stay on until
Okay,
Gene
great.
kicks me off. All right. So Karen, I see your hand is up. Maybe you can also turn on your camera. You might not be able to. So
Thank you so much, Joanna. So, as you may know, I do organizational change management. And, I'm just thinking about, the perplexing reality of culture and your approach. So, basically, as I understand it, you believe in kind of letting the culture be what it is and hopefully changing that through your approach. But what is going to be more overpowering? And I thought of climate change, right? Okay, well, if we're just gonna and the LA fires, right? We're just gonna do what we can with climate change, but we're not getting to the root cause, and it's overpowering eventually. So my question is, why not work with change management to help gather more momentum to power the mindsets of the leaders in tandem with the great work you're doing?
So, Karen, I am a cynic. I
There you
wrote,
go.
I wrote, I wrote three books about this. Practical ways to manage yourself, practical ways to lead and serve others, practical ways to lead an innovative organization. They are all about behaviors. I'm cynical because I have never, ever seen mindset change behaviors. Never. So I want managers to change their behaviors. And if you are an expert in change management, I think we recently connected on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
I would recommend that you work with managers on their behaviors. They drive the culture for the rest of the organization. Instead of, I don't know how to change the culture. I had I have changed over my life, right? And every single time I changed my behaviors first. If if I want to change even my husband's behaviors, thank God we are empty nesters. My kids are all out of the house. They have kids of their own. It's very exciting being in this time of my life. And every single time I want to change my husband's behaviors, because this is our culture, a culture of two people. I have to change what I do first. So I see no value in trying to change the culture. Now, I call this cynical, and maybe it's a reality. I wrote three books about this. I have given more workshops about this than anyone shouldn't have to, and I have still not yet found the key to change management without changing any managers and especially cohorts of managers' behaviors. And cost accounting is real. So the more we have cost accounting, the harder it is to change the culture. Cost accounting is anti-agility. So maybe if you can change cost accounting first, you can change the culture. But I do not know how to change anything else.
All
Glenn,
right. So
I'm
your three books, they were not cynical, but you have developed that it is the cynical. Your three books were hopeful, but you realized not going to happen. Is that right?
yeah. My three books have helped everyone who reads them, and not everyone has read them. So let
Amen. Thank
everyone
you.
know. All right. So Glenn Marshall.
Hi. Just a quick aside. The claim is that a lot of behavior is driven by reward models. So you need to have reward models that are aligned with the behavior that you want. But that's not my question. Something that I find just astonishing is I see repeated again and again that companies go and uh, start a project, go through big startup costs, hiring contractors, this, that, whatever, bring in an agile coach to get the team working at a reasonable level, run out of money, and then disband the team, and then start all over again. I cannot understand why organizations do not queue up a second project halfway through the first so the team can pivot from the first to the second. Obviously, if it's a lot of overhead to start a project, make this project smaller, as you said. But companies are just throwing away money over this, and I don't get it.
So I don't think they realize the cost of delay, right? If you only measure the cost of individuals, like people, as opposed to the value of the team and their cycle time and what they can deliver, right? I'm talking about lean thinking. They're talking about cost accounting. Now, in my project portfolio book, I also said keep teams together. Once teams have finished, once there's always a startup cost to teams learning how to work together. So, for example, I'm an extrovert. Many of my teams have been much more introverted. So, how many extroverts does it take to kill an introverted team? Just one. However, it's really important that I learned how to work with people, and I did. I they they gave me a lot of feedback, so I would. However, why not use that learning and keep teams together as long as possible? Now, that means that people can still move in and out of teams, right? That I'm not saying that, but um, I think that a lot of people either misunderstood Tuckman or took the PMI's approach, which was disband people into a pool of humans, of resources, right? This is resource thinking again, as opposed to flow-based thinking. And if you have a pool of resources, aren't they all the same? Well, no, they're not all the same. So I think people do not realize the cost of delay to thinking like that.
I'm looking at it even more simply. The startup cost is real. It exists in all projects. Gosh, look how much money would save if we eliminated that by reusing our last team. But nobody seems to get that.
Because they're stuck in resource thinking, right? Resource efficiency. They think they have shared services. They think they have a pool of people, right? That's
I'm
the
just,
problem.
I'm just thinking in terms of projects. You pay this cost every time in a project.
So, right. I mean, you and I totally agree. And
Okay.
I'm offering you one option for how other people might be thinking. So
Okay.
let me go on to
Sure.
the
Thank you.
next person. Thank you, Glenn. CS. CS, you.
Mm, yeah, hi. Thanks for the excellent presentation, Johanna. I just missed one of your basic question slide. Like you had said, like why like velocity is meaningless and you have to choose the cycle time. So like I want to know why like we have to choose the cycle time. And my second part question is like if we are using Agile Scrum, then don't we have to use the velocity as it goes with the Scrum? I believe cycle time is for only Kanban, mostly
No,
used.
so in my links at the end, I put a link to that, and while Scrum, I don't know what the Scrum guide says, but there is no reason you have to use relative estimation or velocity in any agile approach. It's not, there's no reason for it. If you have a better measure, then use that. Now, there's also the flow metrics newsletter and that. So instead of you asking me more questions here, feel free to email me later. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ken Roberts.
Hi, Joanna. I hope you're having a great day.
I am.
Awesome. Yeah, so here's my question. How do we help lead or what do you do to address leaders' desire for upfront estimation and budgeting?
So the first thing I ask is, how much do you want to invest?
Mhm.
Right. And when I ask that question, that changes the conversation. Because if we use an agile approach, I can say, we know that the team costs this amount of money in salary. We know what 2 weeks will give us, right? If we know that the team costs this much and you want to invest 2 weeks worth of the team, then that's your answer.
Mhm.
This all depends on how often you can deliver something valuable. So that's why working through the architecture is so important because maybe managers will say, "What can I get for a month of investment?" Right now, you've totally changed this around, and you have to work on the most valuable piece of a feature or a story or a feature set first, and that totally changes how you work. But if they're asking you for top-down estimation, um, I will use this example. I live outside of Boston. I live 8 miles from the center of Boston. It takes me anywhere from 45 I guess I've gotten to Boston in 33 minutes, but it takes me 33 minutes to an hour and a half to get there. This is just driving, right? I can follow a traffic aware app. I do not need to think and learn as I go. And if I cannot tell how long driving into Boston is going to take, how can a team, without knowing what they are doing, how much they will learn, there's no way to estimate that. Now, I wrote a book about that too, predicting the unpredictable. But again, it goes to cycle time. It really goes to how do you understand what is valuable and what is not valuable, and how fast can you get to that first piece of value?
Yeah, and how quickly can you set up your iteration to make decisions just in time rather than trying to make them up front? Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dorit, did I say your name correctly?
Yes, Johanna, you did. So my name is Dorit. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. I currently work as a director of PMO and procurement. New dad. And a couple comments before I ask my questions. So I, first of all, really liked the whole presentation. It was, to be honest, it wasn't either Lean, Kanban, Scrum, or enterprise design thinking. I saw so many things that you mentioned. It was more of a holistic approach to, for the lack of a better term, work. And I know you keep saying flow, but at least that's how I'm relating, where how to pretty much continue doing your work, right? And I liked how you also called out safe as not agile, because for it, it's too complex, won't get. And I'm pretty sure Gene has a lot more to say around it since he comes from less. So completely understand around that, right? My question, getting to the original context, is I actually had a question around the slide where you were presenting for the project pyramid. I was able to understand what drives your project's constraints, but I wasn't able to understand the float aspect, right? So I was just hoping maybe if you could explain that quickly or with an example, whatever that. What did you mean pretty much by float? And by the way, congrats, I checked on AI, right? You wrote about 18 books, so I'm assuming the 19th one is going to be Wisdoms by Johanna or something around that, right?
Well, let me get back to my to the risks. Oh, and of course I can't find them. But I'm not making you dizzy when I do this. Okay. Let me go back here and share. All right, that should work now.
Yes.
Okay. So when you think about one of these is the driver, right? And the way I explained how to do this in Manage It and again and create your successful agile project. I ask senior leaders to imagine it's 3 weeks before you want to release the product, right? You want to be done, and it's 3 weeks from now. You have not quite finished all the features. You have more defects than you would like, and it's 3 weeks. What do they want to optimize for in these last 3 weeks? Because they're not going to get everything, right? They're not going to get all the features, they're not going to get the defects, and they might be able to make the time, but without everything that they have. If people say hire more people, right? If a leader says hire more people, by the way, you can do this if you're without violating Brooks Law if you reduce the WIP. So if they say cost is no oh, I don't care about costs and I don't care about the people you get, then you know that time to release, right? But you have to make the time, the date, then you know the date is the most important thing. And probably then I would ask about the feature set and the low defects. And I know that I now have the way to make trade-offs. If anybody on my project is multitasking, I know I can change that because I can say to them, you said to me that 3 weeks before the end of the project, you don't care about the money and you don't care about the people. These are my people on my project, my program. You're not going to get them to do anything else. No more multitasking. I even get to find a way for them to sit together so they're not separated by stairs or elevators or buildings. That's what I mean by what's driving the project. Then there might be a couple of constraints, and everything else is we have freedom to choose what to change, right? That's the whole point with the project pyramid. We have freedom to choose what to change. So, does that make sense?
It does. My question was more around floats. I understand what drives the
So the
project. My
floats,
question was, what do you mean by floats, right? That's one context I didn't understand.
so the floats are the things that can change.
Got
They're
it.
your degrees of freedom.
Got it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the share and okay. Arena?
Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much for your talk. Yeah, I'm quite a new Scrum Master, but I really want to know a bit more. So I use the opportunity to ask you. I read quite some information about resource efficiency, and you also introduced it today. But I have a question. So, for example, there are people who are not that multi-skilled, let's say, and they got free during iteration. What they supposed to do? So they are not participating anymore in creating an increment, and managers start to worry, like resource efficiency is really bad. So how to explain that it's kind of fine, or is it fine? Yeah. What's your
Oh,
opinion?
and it's never fine for anybody to not participate. No. If they're part of the team, they have to work on the work of the team. So there's at least a two-prong approach to this. The first is working agreements. What kind of working agreements does your team have for people who do not understand all of the work of the team? How will the team change that? The second is WIP, right? How many open, so when I wrote Create Your Successful Agile Project, I said that there's a trap. Everyone takes their own story. Why do you have all of these open stories? Why not have people collaborate? Then you're totally finessing the idea of resource efficiency and flow efficiency. So what you can say to your managers, if your managers want to say everybody is productive, everyone has to work on their own work. Well, do they work on their own work? Managers actually have teams of people. Why would your team, why would your Scrum team not collaborate on their work? Right? And if you want to say, well, person A needs to teach person B, that's fine, right? Does your manager care if they pair? I mean, the reason managers care is because they don't know how to reward people. They don't know how to write performance reviews. This is why, I don't know if Karen is still here, but this is why I think a culture change is impossible without changing behaviors. Performance reviews have to be less important than getting the product out the door, right? They have to be less important. So why would a manager focus on that instead of on getting the work done? I see Tom Miller over here. He's a night space away from you, Arena. He is a very talented Scrum Master. Tom, are you consulting these days? I don't know if he's consulting.
Sorry, Johanna. No, I'm mostly retired. I'm teaching at
Oh,
Illinois State University. So,
okay.
yeah.
So Tom has either written or talked about this, but I really do not understand why a performance review has to be more important than the team getting work done. I mean, why does a manager care how you facilitate the team? I don't get it.
Yeah, but also team as a members of team, they can also be a problem. Sometimes they say like, yeah, I don't know this domain, then I need another task to do. Please give me a task.
So
But then
instead
I
of
guess
that,
it's a wrong hire, right?
well,
If
I
a
mean,
person doesn't want to develop.
how long will they not know the domain? I mean, if the product is moving from domain A to domain B, why would you allow them? So this is the problem. I don't know how much experience you have, if you're a very experienced Scrum Master or an experienced project manager, or if everyone on the team has more experience than you. But this is where you need to take all of your facilitation skills and say, look, buddies, we are a collaborative team. That's what an agile team is.
Yeah.
How do you want to work as a team to reduce our WIP and help everybody else learn the product? That's our job. It's not just finish and demo. It's our job to also learn as a team and be productive as a team. So that's our issue with our working agreements.
Okay. And maybe the last question. Did I understand correctly that you advise Kanban for these situations more than Scrum?
I advise it only because it's easier to create value stream maps, right?
Okay.
And if are you using Jira?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jira is expletive deleted. Just expletive, expletive, expletive deleted. A mess. So you cannot measure cycle time in a Scrum board in Jira. I don't know what they were thinking. However, I would recommend that you change your board from Scrum to a Kanban board so you can measure cycle time, build your value stream map, see where the bottlenecks are, because right now you don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do this by hand, but
yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, but value stream maps we started, but let's say outside of Jira. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Okay.
Hard.
Johanna,
Thanks
how
a
about
lot.
we take one more question? Maybe Max do. Like, how good are you? I just want to be. Some people are thinking me they hate to lose out on the discussion, but
Well, yeah. After this question, I will ask people. Well, put your questions in the chat. Jean, you will send me the chat.
and I want to encourage people to reach out to you directly on LinkedIn for anything specific. So you are transparent there. Please do.
Yeah. I will take one more question and then we are done. Ken, you're up.
Yeah, luckily I got a quick one. Yeah, I kind of agree with you regarding Jira. What tool do you recommend using regarding um, measuring and maintaining cycle time and using that for predictive rather than forecasting?
Cards on the wall.
Yeah.
Monday.
I mean, if you only finish it, I don't know any team that can finish more than one story a day. I just don't. It's very easy to put a card on the wall, point a camera at it, and then you're all done. You make a note on it. Started at this time on this day. Finished this time on this day. Add it up. Make a spreadsheet. I mean,
Spreadsheet.
it
Yeah.
does not have to be that hard.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're at the time. Right. I do want to say one more thing before we wrap up, Johanna. Thank you so much for coming out and being so generous with your personal wisdom and giving us extra time, taking the questions. And it's been great. Some great ideas. I want to thank everyone for joining and being respectful and disciplined enough not to jump in halfway through your conversation, your presentation. So thank you for this, folks. And I do want to encourage everyone to reach out to you directly, Johanna. So if anyone has any questions, I don't need to be a monkey in the middle. I don't need to be in the middle of this. They can reach out to you directly and ask for your advice and for your consultation. And LinkedIn is probably the best way, right? Oh, no,
Yep.
maybe not. It's up to you. Yeah, I think.
No, it's totally fine. Yeah. That's good.
And then
And thank you, Gene. Yeah.
And well, for sure. I'll be sharing your content, your assets. Just share the deck with me, and I'll make sure it goes into circulation.
I will.
So once again, thank you very much to you personally, and to everyone who has attended this call. Thank you very much for being here. Hopefully, we shall
Yep.
see you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.